Hello, everyone. Good morning. How are you all doing today? Welcome to another purposeful conversations with me, Emmy, here in the Pami Code Facebook group. We are joined today by a wife, mom, nana, health and wellness coach, radio announcer, blogger, and podcaster. Goodness, she's so busy. I'm really thrilled that she came to join us today to talk about her Victim to Victory program and how you can overcome obstacles and flourish with hope in your life. So without further ado, let's all welcome Tracey Cook. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm very honoured that you've asked me to be part of this, so thank you.
Well, I always invite, inspiring people, to have this conversation because we actually do learn from each other and, we share our experiences and, we share our thoughts about all these things. So I know that people actually find value from these conversations. So Tracy, actually, what I was drawn to you because I saw this Victim to Victory program that you have. What is it? What is that all about?
It's a little bit of a backstory to it. I won't keep the audience too long, but the backstory to this is in the middle of the 2019, I was cast in a reality show for entrepreneurs,
I've
and I
read
flew
that.
from Perth here in WA. I flew all the way to Florida, partake in a play to win reality show. And a part of that, a lot of me shifted. I had a lot of breakthroughs, and part of me wanted to serve the community more and to give back and to actually make an impact and leave a legacy. And going back even further than that experience brought about the realization that I needed to do more, be more. And it also brought up some unresolved things that I hadn't addressed and I didn't know I hadn't addressed from my childhood, my teen and my adulthood. And that was sexual abuse as a child and being a victim of domestic violence in an adult relationship that was actually quite bad. Now, as part of that domestic violence relationship, I was beaten black and blue with the baseball bat when I was 8 months pregnant. The baby survived, I survived. I left that violent relationship and I kind of suppressed it because I had to pick myself up and dust myself off for me and my daughter, who's now 25. And I had to go to work. I had to get a home. I had to put meal on the table. So I kind of shrugged it off. Now, that all resurfaced last year as part of this reality show, and it kind of came out as part of the process. And I came back on that big, long 19-hour flight back to Perth, and I had a good night's sleep. I woke up and I just felt completely changed. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that when you literally have, I know the meaning of light bulb moment.
What happened? What sparked it?
I think because the emotions kind of came up, and I done a live video on my Facebook and I shared what had happened to me, and I was absolutely overwhelmed at the amount of people, by showing my vulnerability, that actually connected with me, messaged me and shared similar stories. And I thought, wow, that's I don't feel so alone. I'm so glad I shared. It wasn't about me. It was about connecting and making people not feel alone. And a couple of weeks later, I was very honoured to have a interview with a woman that I admire, a mentor, Jessica Higdon, and we done a joint interview, and it came up again. And I literally
have you been suppressing it for a long time? You just weren't talking about it, or
just really suppressing it? Yes, that'd be a great word to describe it.
Because you felt like
because
it?
in the reality show, our emotions were heightened, and we're talking about experiences and learning and growing and why we are who we are, and obstacles everyone had to overcome. And people would bring up things of, rape and sexual abuse, and I was listening, but I wasn't saying anything. And in the hotel room, as part of the process, then it started making me realise wow, I've got some stuff I think I need to resolve to be able to next level and to be able to grow and to be able to impact as well. So after this interview with Jessica Higdon, my messenger blew up. I had over 800 messages. It was mind-blowing. And people that I'd never met before were sharing their stories very openly, honestly and rawly, and so bravely. I commend them for it. And it messed my head up for a while. I didn't know what to do with that information. I'm not trained in any areas to be able to point them to a tool, to be able to offer advice. I simply shared my story. And I thought to myself, I actually feel like I've got a responsibility to give them a voice. And that brought about the Victim to Victory podcast series that I have recently launched, where I feature men and women that have been affected by all different obstacles and adversities, whether it's racism, sexism, sexual abuse, domestic violence, suicide, addiction, whatever they've had to overcome. Last week I interviewed my daughter who's 13 and her friend who are overcoming some very severe schoolyard bullying. So
there are all sorts of obstacles that people face, but
much.
What I find interesting here is I was actually having this conversation with Joy this morning. She was one of our former guests from last week, and she was saying something about all these repressed trauma that you're just holding, and it there's a weight on your shoulder, but you couldn't really pinpoint where that burden is coming from because you're trying to suppress it. And then suddenly, if when you actually let it go and let it loose, it's like, oh, what am I gonna do with this? But it's that self-discovery that can actually lead to healing. You need to become aware of where these repressed emotions and the sources of trauma, where is it coming from. You need to understand it, to be aware of it, and not to be afraid to explore it, so you can actually move forward and get on with what's next in your life.
Exactly. And that's what it was. It was a journey of professional and self-development that brought that to a heightened thing where I couldn't suppress it anymore, and I had to deal with it face to face. And it was literally like a weight had been lifted off my shoulder. And as a result of that, through my vulnerability of sharing, I connected with so many beautiful, brave people who have now left violent relationships or gone on to do something absolutely fantastic, and that brought about the name Victim to Victory. So they're stepping into their power, they're stepping into their new lives, they're still discovering themselves, and they're getting comfortable with being uncomfortable because they're growing and they're learning. That some of them are reinventing and retraining, and it's so wonderful to see somebody who has overcome so many obstacles and so many adversities and really triumphed and come through the ashes on the other side, and actually own that story no matter how horrendous, no matter how horrible it is, and go, yes, that happened, and yes, this is me, and this is what I'm doing about it.
Yeah.
Because if you let that person who has wronged you win by destroying your life, they've won and they're still winning. You can't do that. You can't allow that. You've got to find that fire in your belly where you dig so deep that you have to let it out. And when you let it out, you actually help others, and the story becomes less about you and your story, and becomes about them and their stories. And I absolutely love that I have finally, in my 50s, I can honestly say, hand on heart, I found my purpose. And my purpose is to give a platform and an audience to people who have gone from victim to victory and have stepped into their power and owned their stories, no matter how horrible it is, to be able to go on and connect and share and impact others and inspire others. And look, I'm getting goosebumpy just even thinking about it. Like, it's just, You know, when you
There's
find your
something,
purpose and
yeah,
you find your
exactly.
passion.
Some people, they
Mm,
just go through life doing one thing after another, but not really having that sense of purpose that will ground you and give meaning to your life. But something has to be said about courage, because when you experience all these horrific things, the trauma and abuse and so on, there's this fear that it might come back, or even if you've already escaped that situation, there's this fear of speaking out and reaching out to people, and it does take a lot of courage to be able to share what you've
mm.
experienced with other people, and having that sense of purpose to help others who might still be in that position. So what do you have to say about that, when it comes to fear? Okay, you may have overcome your obstacles already, but if it is still, there's still a weight on your shoulders, maybe you don't really want to talk about it, maybe you are scared that you're going to open a can of worms, or maybe you're thinking, what good will it bring? It's in the past, let me just ignore that. What do you have to say about that? What's the deal about opening up and letting go?
I think it's very, it's like a rebirth. And I think it is like a weight has lifted off your shoulders. And a lot of people can't dig that deep or do the inner work to bring out that courage. And that's probably still a work in progress for many, many people. So by doing this, I'm hoping to connect with people and let them know, hey, we're here to link arms with you. We're here to support and empower you.
Mm.
And I think the words empowerment is thrown around a little bit too loosely these days. But when you actually really have gone through and found the courage, and you are connecting with others and actually physically, mentally and spiritually empowering them, it is so powerful, and it's so much more is needed in the world than it ever has done before, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that everyone likes to be negative about. Just to show that bit of hope, to
Mm.
show that bit of inspiration, to show that bit of support, just for that one person, to help them find their courage,
Mm.
then even if it's just small steps. But yes, going back to that question, you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And it's like the old saying goes, success happens at the end of your comfort zone. It's about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you'll never ever, while you're growing, while you're still doing the inner work, while you're still healing, and that could take years and years and years depending on the person, then once you actually do find that courage, the weight's lifted. But there's always that little voice
Mm.
every now and again that is going to creep into your ears and have a whisper.
Mm.
And you've got to be able to recognize those signs. And if you've got a support system or other people you're linking arms with and empowering you, those days become less and less. So
Yes, and
that's the community I'm trying to encourage.
That's wonderful. That's actually one of the things that we teach in the PAMI code, especially in my books and in the community. PAMI is actually a Greek word that means let's go together. So it's not, you're not alone here. You can actually go together. You can share your wins. You can share your challenges. And you don't have to go through this process on your own, because there will be that voice inside your head. In my books, I call it the inner critic. And even
Yeah.
with the inner critic, I even tell my readers, the inner critic is there. You will hear it from time to time, and it's not a matter of trying to crush it or trying to suppress it. In fact, you have to give your inner critic. I call it the TLC technique. You give it a bit of TLC, but it's not tender loving care. You ask, is it true, is it logical, is it constructive? Because most of the time the inner critic messages that you hear, they are either untrue, they are illogical, and they are destructive. And when these inner critic messages are so embedded in you, like you've actually believed it to be true, it certainly helps to have other people supporting you and encouraging you to ask those questions. Because, yeah, more
Mm.
likely than not, these inner critic messages are there for a reason. They are there because you have unresolved emotions. There's a lot of healing from the trauma that you still have to deal with. But having a community, having other people joining you in this journey actually helps it to make it more manageable. It's not as frightening as it would be if you were doing it on your own.
Yeah, definitely. And you know that there's somebody always to reach out to or to offer advice, or somebody's maybe a few steps in front of you. So they're kind of paving the way as well. And
Mm.
when somebody is paving the way, you're kind of learning from their experiences as well. So if you're very, very open to share, and if you're very, very open to be honest, then I think a lot more people connect with that. And being vulnerable and people's vulnerability, that's where the magic is. Because
Yeah.
when we show that we are real, when we do show that we are vulnerable, when we do show that we're not perfect, then a lot more people connect with us. And I think no matter what your situation is, as long as you've got that support and that community and that culture to lean back on, you can kind of, you're going to have your down days, but you do know that you can pick yourself up and dust yourself off, not a lot more easily, but you can maintain a lot more as well.
Absolutely. But if I can just share something, I was having this conversation with my husband yesterday about trauma, about recovering from trauma, and something came up, and it was about forgiveness. I've experienced trauma a while back, having difficulties and challenges at work. Eventually, I left, and I thought I moved on, but it keeps coming back. I can still sense some bitterness from time to time, and I know that I want to forgive, because without forgiving, you still carrying such a big burden. It's almost like, you are angry at someone, but you're actually drinking the poison. If you know what I mean, you're
Yeah,
actually hurting yourself
exactly.
rather than, being hurting the other, who's actually don't even know that you're angry. You know what I mean? So we were having
Yes.
this conversation around forgiveness. For me, I think it does take a bit of humility, and a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, I can't even think of the word now.
It's
To
more of a humility, I think,
Yeah, and
for forgiveness.
to recognize actually that I'm not really sure if I want to say that it's okay. I want to say that I've forgiven, but it creeps in every now and
Yes.
again. Unconsciously, I don't know, all the bitterness comes out. How do you resolve that?
And I think a part of kind of saying that was them and it's not my fault, actually recognizing that if you're putting us in a situation where somebody else has harmed you, to be able to honestly take a look in the mirror and go, that was them, not me. That was a result of their actions, not my actions. That was a result of their upbringing, or their words, or the way that they deal with things. That's not me. To be able to look yourself in the mirror and to honestly say that was them and not me, I think that's very powerful. That's very, very powerful. And that is a progress within itself. That is a healing within itself. Because once you actually say that was them and not me, you can actually forgive the other person, and you actually start to feel sorry for them. So it flips. It absolutely flips. So it goes from, um, all the emotions of you hate them and you despise them, and then you become, bitter, and then you become angry and things like that. And then all of a sudden you let go. You just let go, and you go, you know what? That was them. That was their actions. It's not a result of anything I done. And then you actually feel sorry for them. So
Right.
in a way, it's a form of forgiveness, but
Mm.
you're not forgiving the other person. You're
You're
forgiving
forgiving
yourself.
yourself, right? Yes, I actually
Very
received
powerful.
an advice about that. Just not really carrying the burden yourself. It's yeah, it's self forgiveness. That's actually quite difficult to do. It's almost like blaming that you've put yourself in that position. But on the other hand, for me, the way I'm managing this right now is that that happened, fine, but it happened for a reason. Because if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have a reason to go. I would have
Mm.
stayed in that position forever because I wouldn't have a reason to go. But because that happened, I was forced, or I made a conscious decision to leave because it was literally killing me. And by doing that, it enabled me to grow. It's way out of my comfort zone. I've been in that environment for 20 years. That's all I know. But stepping away from that environment enabled me to learn more about myself, about the world. It's actually made me see that there's so much to life than that world, if that makes sense.
Oh,
So
that makes perfect
that's
sense.
how I'm rationalizing it. It happened, it was horrible, it was traumatic, nearly lost my life because of that experience. But because it happened, it forced me to take myself out of it. And as a result, I'm growing as a human being, and I have so much life ahead of me. Instead of being there, I now embrace life and look forward to something that's more prosperous and more happy and more joyful than how it was a long time ago. So,
And
yeah.
that's so wonderful. And I think no matter when a trauma happens, in whatever form it is, and to some people's, mild trauma might be somebody else's major trauma. So it's not comparing either. But I think there's quite a beauty in somebody's inner forgiveness. And when you actually see people, like you said, you've stepped away and you're flourishing now. So, that's absolutely wondrous because you found some inner peace. And that's a progress within itself, because it takes so long to actually find that inner peace, to finally be at peace with yourself. And a lot of the stress goes, and you can just be, the most beautiful version of yourself,
Mm.
and step into your power and grow into that. It's quite a beautiful thing to watch people do.
I know. I absolutely agree. And I think what I liked about what you said today is something that actually stuck with me is it's a work in progress. Sometimes you have good days, sometimes you have bad days. Just because you're feeling so bright and chirpy today doesn't mean that those inner critics won't come haunting you again. But the thing is, it's important that you are aware of the inner critic, so you can actually you're able to manage it without you spiraling down. It will be there. For me, I think it will always be there because it's part of your experience. It's part of you as a
Mm,
human being. You couldn't really get rid of it completely because it's there. But understanding what it is for what it is, an inner critic, being aware that it is an inner critic, it enables you to actually manage it and handle it better than just trying to suppress it really and feeling sorry
definitely.
about yourself.
Definitely. And that's where the victim mentality comes in as well. It's like, oh, this stuff always happens to me.
Poor
Oh, why
me.
can't I just, if only I had, you could say that, because that's the victim mentality. It
Mm,
very much is. And I can see definitely how easy it is to slip into that mindset and get that victim mentality. And it all comes back to, if you've got that support system to kind of say to you, no, it's not always like that. Did you know you can do better? Did you know you can be more? Let me show you a few things I went through, and
mm,
maybe this will resonate with you. And then you see them kind of changing and thinking things a little bit differently. And then over time, you see their verbiage and their language actually change,
change. Yeah.
and it becomes a lot more positive. And you can actually see the shrugging of the shoulders. They're kind of standing a bit taller. They're smiling a lot more. They're not wearing their hair all over their face anymore. They're wearing their hair back. You can actually see all these, what would be slight changes, but they're major changes to somebody
Mm.
who has had that victim mindset 100%.
Wonderful. And yeah, it's the power of support and getting it out of your head and recognizing that you're not the only one. Yes, you experience trauma, you experience that, but you're not the only one. And having another person or a community to share our vulnerabilities together, it makes us realize that we are all human. We all have our own struggles. We have inner critics bugging us from time to time, but that's part of the human experience, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I appreciate that you actually do have that platform, your podcast and your blog, just having people to share that and being more open about it. We talk about these things, and for an individual, it just makes you feel less alone, especially when you're carrying so much weight on your shoulders.
100%, yes. And I like that you say inner critic. I like that. That's what I'm going to call the voices
Yeah,
now,
we
the
talk
inner critic.
in my books, and sometimes with my clients, I tell them to name their inner critic to make the inner critic more real. So you give it a name, you give it a character, so you can actually have a dialogue with the inner
Yeah.
critic. And what happens with some people, they try to suppress it. And I think that's what some self-help gurus actually, you have to fight it, you have to crush it. But actually, the inner critic is part of who you are. And you have to show it compassion and have a dialogue and understand where the messages are coming from. Because when you have that understanding, you can make a more informed decision on what you need to do next. If that makes any sense.
My,
So,
my, my girlfriend calls her Felicia. Yeah, not today, Felicia. I am busy. Not today, Felicia. I'm busy. I've got stuff to do.
yeah, absolutely that. You create a persona that's in your head, but it's something that you have a conversation with. And yeah, when you get to know your inner critic, it's easier to manage it. And you hear your inner critic, but that's okay. It's nice to have like a chatter from time to time. you know Keeps you human, but it's a matter of knowing what to do with it, how to manage it, without having to drag you down for so long. You will have your down days, as you said. You have good days, bad days. Absolutely normal for
Yeah.
human beings. But the point is not to stay too down and spiral out of control. You need to be able to manage and keep your balance, so you continue to flourish and live your life as you want to live it.
And that's what we all are here put to do. We're all here to be the very best versions of ourselves. And now the time is more than ever to show hope and inspiration and care and just niceness to mankind.
Wonderful. Well, Tracy, if people want to find you, your podcast, your blogs, where can they find you, and how can they reach out?
They can reach out to the Facebook group, A Victim to Victory podcast series. And we've got a great community in there. And the podcast will actually be launched in a few days.
Oh, wow. Awesome. And how many people
Yes,
have you interviewed so far?
I'm on episode 3 this week. And I have international people, stunt women, women that have been in the services in Iraq,
Wow.
um, some authors, a world title boxer. I've got a lot of people lined up over the next 26 weeks
Wow.
for part of the Victim to Victory podcast series group. So I'm very excited, and I really, really appreciate you having me on to be able to share that and get some insights. And I'm probably going to go and name my inner critic now.
Well, share with us, if once you've named your inner critic, and yeah, have that dialogue with your inner critic. Well, thank you very much, Tracy, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. I hope you found our conversation helpful. I love that tag, victim to victory. If you experience trauma, if you experienced obstacles in your life and you're feeling like a victim, you don't really have to be a victim. You need to have that mindset shift and realize that yes, that traumatic, hurtful experience happened, but you actually need to heal and recover, practice a bit of compassion for yourself, a bit of self-forgiveness. But as Tracy have said, you will have up days and down days. It's part of the human experience. And having a network, a support system to help you go through the healing and the recovery totally makes a difference. Well, anyway, thanks again, Tracy. Thanks, everyone. And we'll catch up again next time for another purposeful conversation with Emee here in the PAMI Code Facebook group. Until then, take care and bye for now. Bye.
Thanks, Emmy.
Bye.